It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, no food review today, and also no Tomlin Tuesday, just a regular Tuesday. How we feeling?
I mean, still kind of full from yesterday, if I'm being honest. I'm not starving here. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of news to talk about. Actually, letting people behind the fourth wall, recording a little bit earlier than we normally would, because some news as it relates to the Steelers dropping immediately within the AFC North. And let's just dive right into it. Former Steelers wide receiver Deontay Johnson, who had been with the Carolina Panthers, obviously part of that trade in the spring, going from Pittsburgh to Carolina, on the move again, back in the AFC North, going to the Baltimore Ravens, along with a 6th-round pick for a 5th-round pick in exchange to Carolina. Already Twitter on fire in terms of Steelers Twitter about this move, and just kind of once again the construction of the wide receiver room. Alan, where are we at with this move?
Well, I mean, it's a good trade for Baltimore. 6 for a 5th is like the equivalent of like lending your buddy $10 that like you're not sure he's ever going to repay you, and you don't really care if he does or he doesn't. You just like,
is this their original? Is this Baltimore's own like, was this their own picks? Because this could ultimately be, if Baltimore goes on to win the Super Bowl, Carolina finishes with the worst record in the NFL. They could move one spot. This could be a trade of one spot.
Yeah, it's not much, right? It's literally like just crossing the street to pick up a quarter. Like that's that. So Baltimore's giving up absolutely nothing for a really good wide receiver, and obviously, it helps Baltimore a great deal. I mean, I don't think their receiver room is as dire as it's been. I think between Flowers and Bateman, they have some talent now. That they kind of went a few years there without any, but I think Deontay Johnson's a big upgrade on what they have, and I think he'll be a difference maker for them right away. Obviously, it's not great for the Steelers when your rival acquires a good player in general, probably especially not great when you have a guy who, the Steelers basically gave him away, and now he's back in your division. He's going to play against you twice. I loved how everyone kept saying, like, remember, NFL rules prohibit the Steelers from trading for Deontay Johnson. The Steelers having just given away Deontay Johnson while essentially taking out billboards that say, we do not want you anymore, Deontay Johnson, is what's preventing the Steelers from acquiring Deontay Johnson, not the NFL rules, okay? That was the first thing, not the second thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think it's interesting because, like, I've seen a lot of conversation about this just in terms of the fit that he is in Baltimore within that offense. Like, how different is he skill set wise from Zay Flowers and stuff? Should they have been looking for a different type of receiver? But when you get this type of player for free, like, what does it matter? Like, regardless, like, even if he is a marginal upgrade to that room, like you said, he's a good player on his own. Is he the best fit for what they were looking for? Maybe not, but you gave absolutely nothing up to get him. So who cares? Like, he's a plug and play guy that can separate with these.
Everything there is to be better at, Dan. So, like, who cares? What, like that?
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it's great.
Again, it's like, to me, it was the argument for the Steelers as well. Like, there's a lot of guys that we brought up where it was like, are they the best fit for what the Steelers are looking for? Probably not, but he's a better player than what's currently on the roster. And if you can get him for a pick swap, a day 3 pick, something like that, you were giving up essentially nothing to make it at the least a marginal upgrade, if not more than that. I think that you do it. And in this case, again, you're talking like potentially 1 pick, maybe somewhere in the 5 to 7. Like, you're giving up nothing to acquire Deontay Johnson here. If you're Baltimore, you do this every day of the week.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if, the Deontay Johnson trade can already burn the Steelers, because I feel like they misread the wide receiver market when they made it. They traded him at a very low point of value. They got almost nothing in return for him, a player in Deontay Jackson, who has been fairly good for the Steelers. Tough night against the Giants notwithstanding, was going to be cut by Carolina anyway. I mean, it was a nothing trade. I think they misread the receiver market. They didn't get an upgrade on Johnson. They didn't really get anybody outside of Van Jefferson. So that part of it was already going to burn him. Now, can you imagine if he goes off against him and like, man, like that, and he's a really good player. Like, none of the problem with Deontay Johnson in Pittsburgh was his abilities on the field. He was great. The whole reason he was traded was the Steelers weren't happy with the off the field fit in the locker room. Thought he was a bad mentor for George Pickens. Didn't like the drama. You remember he was in fights with Minkah Fitzpatrick. By the way, if you get into a fight with Minkah Fitzpatrick, you're like 100% wrong. It doesn't matter what happened
with another receiver as well a couple years
you
prior.
got there. You screwed up somewhere. And Mitch Trubisky as well. I just think the Steelers were tired of the personality. The player, there's never been any question as a really good wide receiver. And so I think this is only going to add fuel to the fire of Steeler fan angst about the wide receiver position, the way it's been handled this year. And I don't think that's a wrong thing to feel.
Okay, so that's a good turning point there because you're talking about for the fans. But how about for the team as well? How do you think that this puts more pressure if you're sitting in Omar Khan's seat to go and do something? We see the Ravens do this because I think the argument could be there watching these other moves be made. Sure, you see the rest of the contenders in the AFC make these moves, and that's one thing. But then you see the Ravens do it, and not only just because they sit right in the division, they're right there with you in terms of one game back within the division, but also just the rivalry between those two franchises and the way that they look at each other. So if from a fan base perspective, that motivation to make a move has been there, do you think it changes anything from Omar Khan's perspective in this front office to make a move?
I mean, I think the return does. I mean, if that's all it's going to take to get an upgraded wide receiver, then it has to happen. If that's what the market is for an upgraded wide receiver, there's absolutely no excuse for the Steelers having not made one. I think the same thing. I mean, obviously they could not trade for Deontay Johnson, but they could have traded for DeAndre Hopkins. They could have traded for Devontae Adams. And I understood passing on the Adams deal at the price. I don't understand not being interested in Hopkins at that price. This price is basically free. I do think they have to find a way to upgrade the wide receiver position. I thought that before this, but I just think if that's what the going rate is, you got to find a way to make one of those happen. Even if they have to overpay a little bit to make it happen, I think they have to.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I hate the idea in general on the surface of making a move just to make a move. And I'm not saying that this would be, but I feel like there is, just because you're seeing everything else around you happen, where you kind of have to take all of that information into consideration and do something. Adam Schefter was on Pat McAfee's show yesterday, the time of recording this, was talking about the Christian Kirk injury. He broke his collarbone, is out for the season. And Tone Diggs, who's on there, Pittsburgh Steelers fan, asked him about had that not happened, what was the market like? And Adam Schefter mentioned he thinks the Steelers would have very much been in play. I had somebody else text me and say, had he not broken his collarbone, he feels like they would have been in play. We've talked a lot about Darius Slayton, who we just saw yesterday go off against the Steelers, and I feel like that's always kind of kept in the back of their mind for the Steelers when a player has a nice night against them, and they've already shown interest in the past. But it kind of sounds like he might not even be available on the trade market, which is interesting. You look at where the Giants sit, certainly not competing right now. Also a pending UFA, had the disagreement with the organization going back to this past offseason where he was trying to get a raise on his salary and stuff like that. So it's interesting to me that Darius Slayton wouldn't be available, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, reported by Mike Garafolo of NFL Network, who, by the way, was in Pittsburgh last night covering Steelers Giants. So I'm sure there's some very direct reporting here. Said that he doesn't believe that the Giants are going to make him available, that they might try to sign him to a contract extension. I mean, I think he's a good player and probably worth having. You look at the rest of what the Giants have at receiver. Theo Johnson, a young tight end I like, but not cost them any money. Malik Neighbors, you have
to pay for a couple of years.
Yeah. And Wanda Robinson, not breaking the bank. So, I mean, I think you look at the Giants roster and you say, sure, this could be a guy they should probably want for the long term. So I understand that viewpoint. But he would be a wonderful fit for the Steelers, almost ideal. I think they have to find a way to overpay if that's what it takes. If it's enticing a team to make a player available that they really do not want to trade, I think the Steelers are in a position where they kind of have to do it, whether it's Slayton, whether it's Jacoby Myers or someone like that. And I know that we've talked about Adam Thielen, we've talked about Mike Williams. I don't know where the trade comes from. They've got to find one. And I think overpaying to entice a team like the Giants to trade Darius Slayton or the Raiders to trade Jacoby Myers is more attractive than like dumpster diving. Like I think that is I think, and I said this in the post game last night with Matt, I think the Steelers defense and Russell Wilson, who are largely aging players, have shown enough through 8 games, 2 in Russ's case, that the Steelers should be okay with sacrificing a piece of the future to invest in now. Like, I think TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Russell Wilson, those guys have Patrick Queen, Minkah Fitzpatrick, the veterans of this team, Isaac Seumalo, have done enough that Omar Khan should say, maybe this isn't good value, but these guys have earned this investment from me right now to say, this is an overpayment, but it's for these guys, and that makes it worth it. I think they've done their part to this point in the season.
And at least in the case of Jacoby Myers, I mean, I had said for a while Darius Slayton was my ideal guy because I couldn't see the Raiders trading Jacoby Myers after already trading Devontae Adams. But if they were going to, he also at least comes with another year on his contract as well. So having that, I think, adds to the desire for me to acquire a player like that because he at least got one more year of control on his contract. But I would very much still be interested in Darius Slayton. I think the thing with that, like as far as the extension talks with the Giants, I mean, for me, if I just like take a step back and look at it, I get it from the team side. Why would he want to sign a contract extension with the Giants though? And also the other part that kind of went into my mind as well, like with this, is this maybe, I don't know if you look at it this way or if you can maybe give some insight into if this is the way that things work. Another thing that kind of entered my mind was, is this them saying this to try to up the return? Like he very much is on the trade block, but this is a way for them to say, hey, overpay us.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Those things do happen. So I think that's I'm not saying that's what's happening, but that is possible. Usually that would come out pretty quickly after that, though, right? I mean, that because it doesn't do them any good for teams to actually think he's unavailable, right? It only does them good for teams to think, oh, he's available, but only for a lot of money, and that would eventually come out. A couple other people we talked about, New England appears to be just selling off pieces. KJ Osborne has been mentioned by some people out there, and we've talked about Kendrick Bourne previously. I think either of those guys could be interesting-ish options. Osborne, you know, he's been a decent producer for the Vikings the last 3 years. Not anything lighting the world on fire, but I think he would be an upgrade for the Steelers. I don't know what your thoughts are about those two guys.
I think if I'm picking between the two, it's probably Bourne, assuming like physically he's close to being back. KJ Osborne is typically always on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of getting separation. That even goes back to Minnesota, like before he started to age and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, I guess either one you could say is a marginal upgrade. I'd rather have Bourne. I think the body type makes more sense to the skill set, assuming again, you know, he's physically back to be able to just kind of stretch the field and hope to get under some Russ Moon balls. I'm not super interested in either, but like if I'm picking one of the two, it's probably Bourne.
Talking about Russ Moonballs, I talked about this on the postgame last night, but I want to give you a chance to. Does the performance of Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson, who were outstanding last night against the Giants, Austin with 2 touchdowns, a punt return touchdown, and another receiving touchdown. Jefferson, 64 yards, a season high. Does the performance of those guys in that game in any way lessen to you the Steelers' need for a wide receiver? Do you see that and say, maybe with Russ, these guys could be okay?
I think you can certainly get more out of them with Russ. I think that we're seeing that. I think we're seeing that come to fruition. By the way, called the wrong receiver to have 2 touchdowns, and I'm kicking myself for it over going Van Jefferson over Calvin Austin. But Van Jefferson did have a good game. Not trying to give myself any half points here, but no, I don't think that you can operate like that as a franchise either, where it's like, hey, this one game is going to determine what we do, what the direction is that we take. Again, we kind of haven't even gotten into the meat of the schedule yet. I still think that there is a need for talent at the wide receiver position. And again, to me, maybe it is more so. I think the argument that you could make is maybe the skill set that you're looking for. Again, maybe it being that deep field stretcher, got to get under the moon balls, as opposed to thinking like we need just anybody. Maybe that's where you go to. It's the type of receiver matters more now than it did before.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you see Calvin operating out of the slot and doing a nice job of it. I think Van Jefferson has shown he can be a decent possession guy. By the way, underrated Russell Wilson throw in that game, little third down spot route to Van, just put it like straight on his forward hand, ran into it. I thought Russ was really good. I thought Van was good too. Of course, catches the back shoulder, but that's not really his thing. No separation on that. I think that it was I saw Next Gen Stats said that was about the fourth lowest probable catch made this season, and you can tell why. Like that's not a ball that's going to be completed very often.
Look at it down in distance too, 3rd and 12.
Yeah, and you look at them trying to complete that pass to Scotty Miller. It's like very obvious exactly what's missing from this team is someone else that can stretch the field opposite Pickens, and also give them some injury insurance for Pickens. Like we've been talking forever about what happens if George gets hurt. I still don't think there's an answer for that. Having somebody else who could do that to me is essential. That's why I think someone like Slayton, Myers would be excellent. If they have to go to a lower tier guy, I agree with Bourne being the better fit of the Patriots receivers. I think Mike Williams would be a decent fit as well. And so I'm much more interested in someone like that than I am Adam Thielen, even if he may be a slightly better player.
I don't want to, steer too far away from wide receiver talk because that's kind of where our mind's been, and assuming that this team makes a trade, that's probably where it's going to be. But, we're talking about yesterday's performance maybe changing the way that we feel about things. And it wasn't just last night, but I think that it kind of came to the forefront. The Broderick Jones conversation continues to get louder. I feel like we've focused all of our attention to wide receiver in terms of this team making a move. Should we be considering the idea of a tackle move, like whether the team would or not? That's a different conversation. But do you feel like Broderick has been bad enough to warrant that conversation taking place?
This is interesting because I think if you're looking at this team purely through the lens of 2024, he's been pretty bad. Like you can make an argument he's been the worst player on the team. And that's not where you want to be. But I think if you look at it in terms of like what they put into him and what and sort of reasonable expectations for him and his upside that remains, I don't think you can give up on him yet. I really don't think they're even close to being able to give up on him yet. So I don't know. Like you're talking about, like I'm saying, like these guys have earned a 5th round pick or a day 3 draft pick as an investment. I don't know that they've earned bench the 1st round tackle that they traded up for. Like that's a significantly bigger investment. Like that's throwing away what they consider a significant piece of their future. And I don't think they should. Like, what's really funny? I saw a tweet during the game, and during the game's hectic, but like someone tweeted about like his regression this year. And I think it's like, he was certainly struggling when he was injured, but this is the same guy he was last year right now. Like there's no regression. This is who he is. And by the way, moving him to left tackle is only going to make his mistakes hurt more and not fix a single thing. I hope we can stop talking about that. There is no way you can watch him play right now and say that guy should be a left tackle probably ever, let alone right now. But, this is who they drafted. They drafted a hyper-athletic, big project at tackle. I don't think he's regressed since he's mostly recovered from the elbow injury. I think he's been pretty much the same guy we saw last year, which was not very good. I don't understand why what he did last year got sort of hyped so much, because it was pretty much the same stuff that people are now freaking out about.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that we've both said that as people were kind of over evaluating or overrating what Broderick did last year. I think he had some good moments for sure in the run game as well, but I think that you've seen that this year. I think it's the pass pro that's really been atrocious, and it's not just because of the elbow or the pinky or thumb or whatever that's given him problems with his punch. Like I just think from a technique standpoint, like his footwork's been a mess at times, and he just very clearly isn't as far along as some people hoped. But I also don't think it's like a surprise to the Steelers necessarily where he's at in terms of his progression either. So but the reason Yeah. No, I agree. Like, I mean, when we drafted him, the first conversation that DB and I had and that we had on here when we first started the podcast was like, when you drafted this guy, you're hopeful that he's like a 10-year starter, but you might not see that return on investment until like year 3. So it's certainly not a surprise with where he's at right now. But this entered my mind last night because Dan Moore goes down. And I didn't feel like coming into the season that when Dan Moore goes down, I would have like lose my breath thinking that there goes the 2024 season. But there was a split second where we didn't know how serious that injury was, where I was like, this is a massive loss if we lose Dan Moore. And then he misses that play. Very first play, Ojulari gets the better of Calvin Anderson and gets a sack right away. Literally, they take advantage of that. But it just goes back to, like, you mentioned how well you thought Russ played and some of the receivers and stuff like that. The offense, yeah, I thought, certainly had their moments. It was, they would shoot themselves in the foot when they would get into the red zone and take 7 off the board for 3, whether it was, George defying all physics and getting the same foot down twice, or the Broderick penalty on the first George Pickens touchdown that didn't count. Like, there's just so many situations last night
turns
that
the
happened.
wrong way. Anderson in there instead of Moore. It was a bunch of random stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's to me why, like, I was actually very encouraged by the offense, and I was more discouraged by the way that the defense played at times last night than I was with the offense.
Yeah, there's a picture from Ed Thompson in our gallery that, like, Broderick Jones is, I don't know what he's doing, but he's like mid-block with both of his feet off the ground. I'm just like, what is happening here? How are we? Wait, what? Yeah, it's not good. But I'm not surprised by it. I think he's a player that is going to need to grow. I still think it was a good investment for the Steelers. I don't think it was a bad draft pick. It's basically gone about how I expected. And I think it's pretty clear that when Troy Fautanu comes back, it's going to be at left tackle. The fact that Calvin Anderson played left tackle in the one snap he was in there should make it abundantly clear that when Troy Fautanu comes back, it's going to be at left tackle.
Oh, hey, by the way, where's Dylan Cook at?
He could have played, but
okay.
He was not elevated from the or activated from the injured reserve. He will be for the Washington game.
Okay, so hopefully, fingers crossed we don't see that situation happen again, but it would likely be Dylan Cook if that took place in a couple weeks. All right, that's basically what I was asking about. But I want to flip the script. Obviously, you and Matt probably talked ad nauseum about the defensive performance in this one. Like I said on our preview, the first thing that I kind of always do every week when we're doing like a preview thing is look at the other team and say, what is the path to a loss? That is the first way that I look at all these matchups. And for this one, it was like, okay, Brian Burns and Dexter Lawrence are going to have to create a couple turnovers, probably combined for like 5+ sacks. Neighbors is going to have to go off. But the other player on the offense that I highlighted was Tyrone Tracy. And what a night that he had. He's a bigger back, converted receiver, kind of new to the position still, kind of learning the nuances. But he had a night last night. I think that the Steelers really had trouble with him, had issues tackling him. Do you think it was more about just like the type of runner that he is? Because if so, I mean, we've talked about that Baltimore matchup for different reasons with Deontay Johnson being on there, but Derrick Henry is their running back as well. So how did you kind of view the Steelers defensive performance and the challenge that Tyrone Tracy gave them?
I thought the Giants did a nice job of running out of light personnel. And Tracy's a pretty fast running back. He was a former college wide receiver, although with the asterisk that he was a wide receiver at Iowa, which has not yet been informed of the invention of the forward pass. So, how much of a wide receiver he was is in question. But he is the kind of guy that if they flex him out wide, like that's troublesome matchup for Landon Roberts, right? And so it was a lot of Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen in there. And I thought the Giants did a nice job of sort of spreading the Steelers out and then running it down their throats. I do think that is a problem for them going forward that they're going to have to figure out. I think Patrick Queen has been outstanding in coverage, but he has not been great against the run. I think Wilson has been up and down. There's been some highs and some lows, sort of as you would expect for a rookie drafted where he was drafted. I think Cam Sutton coming back as a bigger slot corner will be a bit of a help there. But I think they've got to find a way. I don't think Keanu Benton played enough in that game. I think they got to find a way to be a little bit more stout against the run when teams want to spread them out. That's not a problem for the Ravens because Ravens are a base defense team. The Steelers
Yeah.
have a good game plan for them, but there are other teams like that are going to try to spread you out and then run it. And I think that's really the first time. The Cowboys did it to some extent, but the Cowboys have more tight end talent. I think that was really the first time a team really, like Theo Johnson, I love as a young player, big athlete, not blowing away anybody from a blocking standpoint. Like that's pretty light personnel when the Giants were out there with 3 wide receivers. Their tight end is Theo Johnson. The running back is a former college wide receiver. Like that's very light personnel, and they were still running it. I think that's a problem for the Steelers.
Okay, so the problem you think was something, because I haven't watched it back. Like I just on the surface with him being a bigger back, I was curious if you thought that was the aspect that was giving the Steelers trouble. But you're saying it's more so because they were able to get the Steelers into lighter box and take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think so. And the Steelers also blitzed a lot, which worked really well for pressuring Daniel Jones. But sometimes you have a blitz and it's a draw, or it's a misdirection run play, and you can get caught in some blitzes. And I think that happened a couple times too.
You mentioned you thought it was a tougher night for Deontay Johnson. I saw some people kind of sharing the same sentiment about Joey Porter Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Darius Slayton on the other side of that. I mean, I saw the facial expression that you just gave, by the way. I didn't necessarily feel that way about Joey as much as Deontay Johnson. But how did you feel like those two matched up on the outside? I think that Slayton's an underrated player. I think league wide, I don't think people view him as a very, he's not a household name, but I think he's a fine wide receiver too. And obviously Malik Neighbors was just drafted 6th overall for a reason. So what did you make of the performance with those guys?
I thought the Giants did a nice job of moving Neighbors around, so it was hard for the Steelers to keep Porter on him. They got a couple of him against. There was one on Patrick Queen, I think, and there was another one on another easy one on Beanie Bishop, where like that's just a mismatch, right? Like that can't be happening. I thought in general, I thought Joey did a nice job with them, and obviously then he had the tip for the interception on the game-winning play. I didn't think Joey was bad at all. I did think Deontay Johnson had some trouble, and I thought it was sort of compounded because the Steelers' run defense wasn't winning on first down, makes it harder to give a guy help, right? Like you don't want to sit in those too high shells on 2nd and 4, right? Like because you're just sort of yielding the first down. And so I think the Steelers kind of got stuck where the Giants went spread on first down, then ran it. They had success running it. And that sort of dictated, the Giants were dictating to the Steelers the way the game was going to be played on that when those units were on the field, because they were winning on first down with the running game. And I think the trickle down effect of that was that the Steelers had a hard time finding extra help to give to Deontay Johnson with Slayton. Obviously, Neighbors, the guy you really can beat you, but Slayton is a dangerous player in his own right, as he showed. And I think the one big play early on, you can kind of see Daniel Jones looks over to Neighbors, Minkah Fitzpatrick bolts from center field over to help. Then he looks back to his left and has Slayton open. There's one safety. You're going to make him pick. He's going to pick Neighbors. So, I think the Giants winning on first down dictated some coverage decisions later, which led to Deontay Johnson not having a lot of help.
Yeah. Certainly he's had a good season. I expect him to bounce back. I don't think it's going to be a sign of things going forward, but be interesting to continue to monitor that. Getting healthy, hopefully with the bye, should have a lot of players coming back. Excited to talk about that as we see the injury reports start to come out over the, when we get into the Commanders week. But the last thing that I want to talk about is the special teams. We obviously got a special teams touchdown in this one from Calvin Austin. And over the last few years, we've talked about the special teams unit not necessarily being very good. Like they've always been able to get their hands on footballs. Like Miles Killebrew, always good for a block or two, it seems like every single year. But just as a whole, the contributions that they're getting from special teams in all facets. Like obviously this year, we've seen an uptick from the punt game. Cam Johnson, obviously early in the season, then he gets hurt. Now Corliss Waitman, but they're like punt coverage has been good. I feel like obviously they're still blocking kicks. They get a punt return touchdown. They've just seemed to be very good in that phase now. Why the uptick this year, do you think? Assuming you feel that way as well.
I think Danny Smith is up for assistant coach of the year as of right now. I think the Steelers special teams are maybe the most dominant single unit in all of football when you compare how good they are to how good the second best special teams unit is. They're like head and shoulders ahead of everyone else. Not only are they not giving up anything to the opposition, no blocks against, no big returns against, hardly any returns against at all. They are coming up with a huge game-changing play almost every week, and they're doing their job, their routine job routinely. Chris Boswell has missed every field goal from like reasonable distance, or has made every field goal from reasonable distance, leads the NFL in field goals, on pace to set the all-time record. Corliss Waitman, outstanding. Punt coverage, outstanding. The kickoff coverage, outstanding. Like what more could you want from the special teams unit? I think they're doing incredible. As to why, I think part of it is just the continued dedication to finding guys that are good at those jobs and investing in them. I think when you look at a guy like Calvin Austin, when you draft him, this is something you think he can do. But like even really good punt returners aren't getting more than like one a season, or one or two every 2 seasons or something like that. That's still really good. And so I think it's just an investment in it, and then in patience. I think the Steelers have always been a team that's highly valued special teams. I think they've always had star players on their special teams. You see Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick on field goal block. You got a guy who's a first-round pick in Terrell Edmonds covering punts. Last block on the punt return, the big one that springs them for the last 35 yards is DeMonte KZ, a veteran player who certainly does not need to be on special teams, out there setting the tone. Like, I think when you have that buy-in, good coaching, and good players, that's what's going to lead to good special teams. I think Danny's always been a creative coach that comes up with new wrinkles and ways to do things. But honestly, like, it hasn't even been that. Like, that was just return left. That wasn't anything special. Jeremiah Moon's block was just him beating his guy. Like Danny hasn't even really gotten into his bag of tricks yet, and we've already seen an impressive performance from the Steelers special teams.
On that Calvin punt return touchdown, Rodney Williams had a nice little like box out block. Nice job not taking a penalty there. Obviously, I saw him on the field after the game and brought it up to him, and he was like so surprised that I even like took notice of it. Like, he was so appreciative that I even mentioned it to him, because he's like, dude, nobody ever talks about that. So like, I just thought that was also very large, especially compared to me. So.
Hot Rod, I actually talked to him after the game. Me and Brian Batko from the Post-Gazette went over and interviewed him about it, and he did the classic like hands up. I didn't do anything, and it was an important block. And I asked him, is your first move after that, like you see Calvin get cleared, you just kind of check around and make sure that nobody got you? And he's like, no, I was pretty sure that one was clean. But there was a flag like way upfield. I knew it wasn't on me, but I was a little nervous, like jogging downfield. Like, should I sprint down there and celebrate, or do we have to do that again? because if we have to do that again, I need to conserve my energy.
That's why, and no one could like the stadium was kind of like, do we celebrate? What do we do here? Had to kind of wait for confirmation, because we had already seen 2 touchdowns come off the board for the Steelers in that game, and we're like, oh, here we go. Is this going to be a third one due to a penalty? But obviously wasn't. Great special teams play that the Steelers continue to make. Alan, anything else?
No, man, I think that was a lot. Good show. Good stuff. Really appreciate everyone chiming in on the live stream last night. Great response from our turn as review guys yesterday with our Permane Brothers sandwich review. Yeah. Lots of good comments there, and we did get one comment in particular that I do want to highlight here on yesterday's show, because I thought it was really what we're all about. It's a little bit long, so bear with me here. This is from Steeler Nation in the Heartland. Alan and Smitty, thank you for creating the best Steelers podcast available. I'm a regular listener to the audio version of my morning walks. I so appreciate the rich perspectives that you provide with historical knowledge, journalistic insights, and younger fandom appreciation. First of all, that is how you get your comment read on this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I might put that like on my wall later.
But you should get the tattooed on my back.
Yeah, there you go. I'm 50 years old, grew up in Western Pennsylvania, now live in Central Indiana, where my 18-year-old son and I have been glad to get to Lucas Oil Stadium the last 3 years. The Steelers are coming to Indy, and just talks about his time growing up rooting for the Steelers in the 1980s and understanding what it's like to be a fan of a team that doesn't have a quarterback, and all this stuff. And so here's the question, though. As we go into the bye week, how many questions do you think you will get about whether the team will sign one or both of our top quarterbacks to be with the team beyond the current season? I imagine Mike Tomlin does not care to comment one bit about options for 2025. It's only focused on what we're doing right now. Thank you for all the energy you put in the podcast. Great comment. I said that I thought if it was Fields, they should actually break their rule and sign him to a contract. But with Russ, I don't know. Just, I know we're already late on time, but what are your thoughts about the idea of hey, it's a bye week. I know that they don't do this, but they've also never gone into a season with 3 quarterbacks on expiring contracts either.
Right. It
was a weird, unique situation. Would you consider sending a contract offer across the table?
The whole contract and season thing is one of those things that I've never felt like they have to continue to do. I don't fully understand. I do and I don't in terms of this, but I think that there's a time and place to break traditions and have at least one case be an exception here. I mean, it seems like this is the path forward that they want to take, at least for a couple seasons, if you want to believe some of the reporting that's been out there. If they feel like they've seen enough through 8 quarters to move forward with another season of Russell Wilson, it gets done at a reasonable price. I mean, I think that would be the more likely path than Justin at this point. I think it'd be kind of odd to have had Justin play those 6 games, go to Russell Wilson, and then say Justin's the guy that we're turning to the future into. It's interesting. I mean, I certainly would think about it if it's at a reasonable price. Again, I think a lot of people have kind of missed that mark in terms of, okay, he's here for the minimum this year, but that's not going to be the case beyond 2024 if you want to have Russell Wilson. So I have no idea what that looks like, but just based off what we've seen in 2 games, and I don't necessarily have interest in dropping a rookie quarterback into this situation with, we've talked about where TJ Watt's at in his career, where Cam Hayward's at in his career. So I would definitely sign up for another year or 2 of Russ at a reasonable price.
I agree. And I don't know if I would do it in season, but I would be playing right now with the intention of re-signing Russell Wilson.
That's fair. Have they what is as somebody that's covered the team, what is the reason though that they just don't want any type of distraction, literally just because it's all about football? Is that the
they just want both the front office and the players to be focused on the team and winning games and not, the other thing is it's good in negotiating in the off season to have a deadline. To say hey, here's the day where we don't I think that really matters a lot in terms of stuff they're talking about in the offseason, and they want to stop talking about it. They want to say hey, when we get to this point, we're done talking about it. But when it's something new that comes up and say, hey, we were not talking about this before, but the situation has changed. And right now, as we sit here on October 29th, maybe we want to do something that we were not talking about in the summer. I don't think it really provides any value to them. I just wonder if they worry that doing something like this will sort of erode that hard deadline that they've established before the season, right? Where they have a good understanding with player agents that if you do not get a deal done with the Pittsburgh Steelers by the time the ball gets snapped in week 1, you aren't getting it done. Does doing something here now erode that resolve that they've built up in other contract negotiations? I think that's the question for the team to answer.
Last thing I want to ask you, what's your belief in terms of that chip on the shoulder motivation thing? Because that could be another thing too, right? Whether that's, I'm not saying that that's the intention, but have Russ be chasing that next contract as opposed let's see how this season goes and know that that's on the other side of it, depending on how things go.
I think that is a real thing for some people. I think you can, if you want to. I'm not saying it's true, but if you want to, I'm not going to argue with you if you attribute Najee Harris's success this year to playing in a contract year. I think certainly the way he showed up and been motivated from day one and his level of engagement, I mean, I would really point directly to that. I think his success probably has more to do with the fact that the offensive line has finally figured out how to block in front of him. But Russell Wilson has so much money that, like, I don't think right now he's being motivated by finances very much. I think he's being motivated by pride. I think the same thing you saw towards the end of Ben Roethlisberger's career. When it's been a long time since you had one, you don't want to just fade away. You want to go out on top. You want to have that sort of end of the career moment to say, like, here it is. I still got it, and I decided to step away. I think that kind of stuff is more what's motivating Russell Wilson than chasing an extra $5 million next year. He's got he's not even the breadwinner in his own household. Like, he's got all the money.
So that's the thing, is like, when I say chasing that contract, it's not about like the money side of that. It's about the statement that another contract makes for him to say, I can continue to play at this level. But yeah, good stuff. We'll see how it obviously all turns out and stuff like that. But Alan, till then, tell the people they can find you.
At @Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, and TikTok. PGH Steelers Now is the site's account. SteelersNow.com. Go over there, check out all the written work, all the latest trade news, all the analysis from me and DB. Sign up for using promo code Alan10 to get 10% off an annual subscription to SN Plus, where you not only get all the best stuff, but also an ad-free reading experience, which is so worth the $4 a month. Go check it out. And of course, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel. Don't miss a single episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive, Steelers Morning Rush, Sights and Sounds, all the great stuff from the locker room, post-game, you name it.
We continue to be on the up on the YouTube channel, by the way. Just crossed 14.1K, so the road to 15K continues. Appreciate y'all that have already done so, but if you haven't, be sure to subscribe for sure. Hit us in the comments with your thoughts on anything that we talked about today, the performance of the offense, performance of the defense, where this team needs a receiver. Do they need a tackle? Where are we at with Broderick Jones? As well as, would you want the Steelers to break their tradition of not signing players to extensions in season for Russell Wilson, or even in this case, I guess Justin Fields, throw him into the conversation as well. But let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you're listening somewhere else, be sure to leave us a 5-star review and subscribe over there, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from. You can find us there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive, just like you can find us on TikTok, and then you can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. For Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.